Just 2 weeks left of your SuperCoach mid-season buys, and that number 2 might just be the amount of upgrades left you've got to go before you land with your team in a completed state. Now, truly, your team's never really complete, but with trades thinning, challenges hitting, we've got to start maximising every single move we make to make sure it's improving our team and getting us in a sweet spot to come out of the buys and ready to attack for the final few months of your SuperCoach season. Here again, we got you set though with my top 10 trade targets of the week for SuperCoach. I got some value options for you. We are going to spend some decent amount of cash. Want to look at some fixtures for you too to help you make the right moves this week. Let's jump in. My number 1 trade target of the week. I've been bullish on this guy for a long time, and it's finally time to put him into this series. Callum Mills is my number 1 trade target this week. He's priced just over $350,000. He's coming off the back of a 107 against the Tigers. Now, I know it's not the highest caliber of opponent, but let's think about what he can do, not just historically going back a handful of years where he was the forever 110 premium mid. But now we're getting him at a space where he's basically priced in the high 60s. When looking at this spot, whether it be at your D6, your D7, or even in your flex, to build depth of scoring and ceiling potential of scoring. And that is exactly what Callum offers for you at a heavily discounted rate. A player that as recently as his last game of AFL has dished up a SuperCoach ton. I know the caliber of opponent was lower than maybe some others, but still he did it and he got there without centre bounce presence. He did take a couple of kick-ins in this game, but what will be fascinating for me to watch unfold this week is now that he's had a couple of games back, he's had a bye, he's had a break, he's got a bit more conditioning into his body after a interrupted preseason. Do we finally see that which Dean Cox promised us in the preseason? That would be Callum Mills back into the midfield. If that eventuates, this is a no-brainer. But even if it doesn't, Callum Mills is such a smart footballer, gets into damaging places, whether it be across the wing and half back, to intercept, to create scoring opportunities. Regardless of where Callum is, he wins contested ball. He sets up the play at a high 60s price point for a guy that even if he just goes high 80s from here, which I do believe is on the lower end of the forecast, it's great value. And to get that at a flex spot, where you're looking for some ceiling, even as a D7 and you're rotating a him and a McKercher or a McCarthy, whomever it is, this is great value. And we need value for money, especially if you want to go all the way up to the top of the tree and own your Cherries, your Bontempellis, your Richards, your Whitfields, the whomever it is. If you want those big end boys, maybe you just need to find a good option at a lower price point. And that's exactly what Callum Mills is. He's my number 1 trade target this week. My number 2 trade target is Jason Horne-Francis. He's still going to probably be cheaper for you next week with that break even of 131. It is reminiscent of what he did last week when he came back off that hamstring injury and dished up a 136 without really attending a centre bounce at all in the game against Melbourne. Kicked 1 goal 3. He looked powerful. That speed was back and he looked refreshed, and understandably so, a month removed from playing AFL football. But there's a couple of things I like about Jason Horne-Francis. And before I get there, this episode's being recorded before the details about his shoulder has come out. Now, it seems to be like it's going to come out okay. Did hurt his shoulder late against the D's, but he's had the scans. Apparently, there's nothing too serious, but I haven't heard that officially from the club yet. So this video and the trade targets get completely blown up by the time this is out. But assuming the clean bill of health, which is what I've heard so far, he needs to be at a high-end priority, under 500,000. And he is the guy that we all have either wanted to have if we didn't own him at all during the year, or loved owning for big chunks of this SuperCoach season so far. To get him at under $500,000, steal. An average of high 90s is not reflective of what he truly is when you remove that hamstring impacted game. Not true of what he is. But the thing I like most about this is while his ownership of 20% overall feels low, in the top 1%, only 1 in 3 coaches have their hands on him. So if you are a genuine chance of winning SuperCoach this year and you don't have him, Well, he's at an attainable price point. His matchup against the Swans is actually pretty decent. His lowest against them in his last 3 games is a 94. So decent matchup, good price point. Yeah, you could wait a week and get him, but politely, why would you do that when he sits in that spot? To me, it's absolutely the move to make. In at number 3, I'm going crazy here. Sam Darcy. I'm going rogue. Sam Darcy is such a great value point. Often in the preseason, you might hear channels like us talk about, hey, if you remove this injury impacted game from a player's average, here's their truant normative. And sometimes that's a helpful narrative to do. Other times it's loading the dice, because what happens if you take this player's ceiling game out? All of a sudden they're not as good. But with a player like Jason, it was so early in the game. I'm happy to do that. Not Jason, Sam rather, should I say. With a player like Sam, where it happened so early in the game, I suppose Jason Horne-Francis, you could say the same, who are at number 2. Sam's just such a high-performing player. Now you might go, yeah, but MJ, these key position forwards, as good as Sam's been this year, it needs to come off the back of a guy that's delivering big scoring moments against great opposition. Okay, he plays Richmond this week, one of the best matchups for key position forwards. And he's not just your traditional key position forward. He goes into the ruck and he impacts not just at centre bounce, but around the ground as well. At this price point, there's no more buys to come, with a great matchup this week. And again, you could maybe, if you really want to, wait the extra week from a break-even perspective. To me, I'm at this point, and Jason Horne-Francis probably sits in this similar category as well, if fit, which, again, at time of recording, he is. Just get a guy that's got a good matchup right now and cop the 10 or 20,000 that you could have saved. Politely, points on field to me is probably more critical rather than a guy's $20,000 saving. I'd rather the hoped 130 that Darcy could give me this week against the Tigers rather than save $20,000 and miss that ceiling game in any round, let alone in a best 18. Yeah, this is a great time to buy. Good matchup, still a really good price point. I'm hands on. I'm all in. Sam Darcy, my number 3 trade target. Ready for number 4? It's a guy I had in the trade targets last week. I want to put him to your attention again. Zach Butters. He's coming against the Swans this week. He's right at his basement of his break even, though. It's at 90 now, which is well and truly north of what we know he can do. In his last 2 games against the Swans, who he's playing this week, he's got an average of 148, including a 164 earlier this year. I know that screams tag could be coming his way, and it absolutely could be the case. But politely, James Jordan and the way Sydney are playing under Dean Cox, it's not as restrictive as it was last year. Has he done some jobs? Yes, he has. But if you look at his impact on when he sat on a player and how crushing his ability was to prevent their scoring, it's nothing like it was last year. So a consideration, of course, but it's nowhere near as fearsome over the totality of 2025 as it was for 2024. So to get a guy that's averaging 119, still in only 1 in every 4 teams overall, at just under 570k, I want a piece of Zach Butters. Last week was nice to get him. This week is probably your last chance before it starts ascending. Because if he goes anywhere near what he's done in his last 2 games against the Swans this week, again, I do expect Jordan to make him a little bit more accountable. Man, this could be a little bit of a lower score, like a 110. And to get a guy that's got ceiling about him of 150s, 160s, 170s at just under 570k, I'm all into that. I'm happy to do that. And then my number 5 trade target for you. He's coming off back-to-back tons. I'm talking about Harry Sheezel. Yep. One of my favourite players is back. In his 2 games off the bye, he's rocking an average of 126. And importantly, he's doing it in a new role that he didn't have earlier in the year or throughout the majority of 2024. This halfback, easy ball winning, lots of kick-ins, lots of uncontested possessions and transition marks. kind of gone. Rather, he's moved into a high half forward and midfield role. Arguably, you could say if they were reallocating the champion data positions right now, he'd be a mid forward, not a defender mid, if you were to base it off the last month or so. But he's flying. 5 of his last 7 games are tons, 126 post-bye, and he's in a favourable role where he is now one of the key playmakers and not getting sucked deep into defensive roles inside forward 50, which he was for a period of time through there. Now, he's already played Carlton once this year, but that was when he was in that halfback role, and Carlton distribution against them is not a super favourable role. An 86 is what he's done already earlier this year, but he's in a new role, highly owned, and just over 500,000. It looks like he's a little bit more settled as this high half forward and extra mid coming up to stoppage and to create a clearance outlet and a transition player that gets engaged and involved with it. I'm pretty happy to get my hands on Harry. High ownership, high scoring ceiling, off the bye, and now found his feet in this new role. I'm happy to jump on and put him there. So those are my top 5. I'll run them through again. It's Mills, it's Horne-Francis, it's Darcy, it's Butters, and it's Sheasel. They are my top 5 trade targets. But do you need a couple more? All right, let's give you one. It was the guy that I'm pretty sure off memory was, if not my number 1, my number 2 trade target last week. Hopefully you got him. If you didn't, that's okay. You've still time to fix it. Zach Johnson is who I've got through there. Yes, it's not great that he's coming into the bye this week, but politely, you're using him to just scrape some money off a player and move on. A Xavier Lindsay type who's on his bye, make the cash if you're still sitting in that space and just jog and run. Maybe you're owning a James Peatling type. Take the scrape and run. A Dan Curtin on the more unique side, scrape and run the money that this player has made. He's already gone up $66,000 last week after the back of his 84, but he's basically got the same sort of break even that he had last week. And you only need him on field for this week. Really what he's going to give you is 2 things. Again, priority timing would have been last week, but I don't think it's too late. Because while you only need the dot on field this week and the cash on the player's head this week, if he can move to an M10 for you, I think he's done enough that even when some of these players come back from injury, his last couple of weeks has been pretty impressive. Essendon are kind of stuck in a halfway house with their list at the moment. And from my perspective, I think they need to, instead of going back to the well of what does Dylan Shield give us, we know what he does. He goes okay, got some gut running about him, but that's it. Johnson is a bit of an untapped anomaly here. We don't know what this could turn into. And so do you want to go back to the well with what you know, or do you want to go to something that could be 2 or 3 times better than that? I hope they go this way, but again, regardless, he gives you a dot on field this week. It gives you that opportunity to scrape some money off a guy on his head. I probably wouldn't do it as a sideways move. So if it's like a Clay Hall or a Gross or a L Hawley, I just don't think that's worth the trade politely, unless you're flush with options. But if it's getting you another 100,000 or so off a player's head and creating a green dot this week and an outlet for you after the buys, I don't mind it as Zach Johnson in that spot. My number 7 trade target is Miles Bergman. His last 5, he's gone 103. His last 3, he's gone 116. Ever since he moved into that tag role on Jordan Dawson in the showdown, they've just kept him in this spot of accountable at their best clearance midfielder that they're coming up against in opposition. And then often these have been players that when they go forward, he's still able to stay with them. Sometimes we see this with opposition teams, right? Where they put a player on the best clearance or best ball winning midfielder and they go, mate, go forward, try to break the tag. And then all of a sudden opposition teams go, okay, well now that midfielder's got to run and do another role and we'll put our best kind of third tall or high half defender that could play in this spot, and they break the tag and all of a sudden it's game over. With Bergman, Port Adelaide don't have that concern because not only is he a capable ball winner, he's built his craft at the AFL level as a defender that's not just accountable but can intercept and can rebound. And so this new development for Port Adelaide, I love for them because he's going to tag, as far as I'm concerned this week, he's going to an Isaac Heaney. And Heaney, the way he would break a tag, even a Chad Warner, should they choose to go that way, they'd push them forward, break the tag, push them up high, create that separation, that mismatch, and all of a sudden get goal side and all of a sudden score involvement or themselves kicking the goal. Bergman could just play that run with roll. He did it last week against Petrarca. He did it against Dawson in the showdown, Toby Green, before he got injured. He's now shown he's got a function in this team that is really damaging. And at just over 450,000, we talked about with Mills, looking for value and scoring ceiling, let alone him with a dual position status. Get on board. If you're trying to get a good ceiling scorer at D6 that might even roll into your flex, you roll him through with a McCarthy type or a Sheasel or a Sinclair or a Rosie, anybody else. Versatility in your squad for days, and with such a good break even sitting there at the moment, I still want to get my hands on it. 3 more players I'm going to give you, and this one, full disclosure, could go pear-shaped for you this week. Full disclosure. But sometimes when you can get the best, you get the best. Nick Dayos is who I'm talking about. He's over that $500,000 marker, but now this average and break even are pretty much neutral, which is always a nice indication of time that this is a good spot to jump on to him. He's got the Marcus Windhager tag, who I know historically has done a job not only on Nick, but on a number of players, including Marcus Bontempelli last week. But Nick's very, very different to Marcus. And the things that Nick does and the way he moves and how he goes forward, we talk about players able to break tags by positionally moving into different lines. Nick's been doing that against opposition teams and really carving up. So as good as Marcus is and did a great job last week, I'm not as bullish on how restrictive it could be to a Nick Dayos type. And regardless, if you look at the inside midfield matchup of who they've got after this, they've got inside their next 3 games, they've got 2 pretty neutral matchups. One's the Blues, the other's the Eagles, who, while not awesome for inside mids, are the easiest team to score against overall in SuperCoach. So put that into your mix. And then after that, they come up against the Gold Coast Suns, who are the easiest inside mids to score against using the last 5 data. It's sometimes you've just got to get the great players when they're at a good price for you, even if the matchup isn't awesome, and just neutralize his potential to harm you. And that's the ideology with a Nick Dayos. Could you wait another week? Of course you could. But at this price point, yes, there is the flag of the Windhager tag, and I think that's exactly where they'll go. But Nick's the kind of guy that I can see break the line open a little bit more. And no shade on Bont, but they're up by 50 points. So why did he need to do something to reinvent the wheel? It was, you're going to hang with me all day? That's fine. We'll just kick 7 goals on your head. Who cares? We win. Dayos is a very different style and type and ideology of player that he'll go, I don't care if we're winning by 50 points. I want my share. I want to get involved, and not in a selfish way, but in a I'm going to do my part and I'm never going to give up. Bont didn't give up. He's just like, I don't care. Knock yourself out. I'll just give it to Richards and he'll score on you. Nick's a different temperament in that regards. Anyway, off that, regardless, if you want to get your hands on Nick Dayos, there's the flag there this week, but the run is really starting to open up for Collingwood, and I can see Nick Dayos, even in this challenging week, doing something pretty exceptional, pretty special. Number 9, trade target, Colby McKercher. Defender mid, he's just over 400k. Some might put him ahead of Bergman. I'm going to put Bergman just marginally ahead of him, just due to, I think there's a little bit more fluency of scoring that's not dependent on 1 or 2 variables. Because for Colby, what is his A1 skill set that he is being played to right now? It's that he's a sublime user of the ball by foot. And politely, that was the difference between his scores over the last 2 weeks. Now, yes, there's about 8 touches difference between what he did last week and the week prior to that. But let's look at his efficiency of ball use. In that game where he had 35 touches and went that big 144 score, 35 touches, 88% efficiency. Last week, just the 27 touches, 55% efficiency. So herein lies the challenge. But the role, importantly here for you, the role maintained the same. 6 kick-ins over the last 2 weeks in each of the 2 games. So the role didn't change last week, but rather his ability to effectively distribute the ball by foot was impacted. Did you watch that game? Did you see some wet weather footy? Did you see some dry weather footy? Did you see how one team played him differently to the other? Those two games were very, very different in a lot of different variables, certainly in terms of quality of opposition as well. But there's a few variable reasons that are, I believe, game-dependent factors. The role didn't change. So if you're bullish on him last week and you're like, oh, I copped a crappy score, don't get too concerned. If you couldn't get or didn't get into him last week for whatever variable reason, he's still priced at a spot that I'd want to get my share on him. Now, I have Mills over McKercher, very much so. That cheaper price point, I very much have that in the pedigree that's there. But it's a spot. He's coming up against the Blues this week, which for wing halfbacks, which kind of sits in that role, more halfback than wing of late, fourth easiest over the last 5 weeks. The only thing I'd add to that, though, is Carlton actually really hard to score against for players that play in that general forward or defensive role, and then also for those taking kick-ins. It's generally a pretty bad matchup. So if you're hoping he's going to build his score through kick-ins, it's not going to be favourable, but he's in a halfback role that is favourable. I still like the role. If you're looking for value, if you're looking to try to get a guy that, again, could pair with Mills nicely at D6 and flex, this could be the spot. And then my last trade target for the round. Let's not skimp on some cash. Let's go and drop over 600,000 on a player, but he's delivering for us at the moment. I'm talking about Luke Jackson. In his last 3, he's going 128. In his last 5, he's going 127. He's just had the one score all year under 91, and he's coming off the back of 5 consecutive tons. And these are not just small hundreds. We are talking ceiling. This is the beauty of SuperCoach, not just in best 18 where some rubbish scores fall off, but you get protected by some crap ones too. Bontempelli owners, you feel my pain. Hopefully he fell off for you last week. But really what you're looking for from now to the end of the year, outside of consistency of availability and scoring, you need some guys with some ceiling, whether you're trying to win your league or get it all done and win the cash in your ranks. You need players that create separation. And not only is Luke that from an ownership perspective, but he is from a ceiling perspective. He's got 4 scores over 140 plus this year, and 2 of those are over 160. So there is your ceiling. He offers versatility within your squad, which again, when you're conserving trades for either longer term injuries or attacking moves in the final month of the year, you can move him into that ruck or forward or flex spot and really play the lines and the matchups should you need to. And then this week, they got the Bombers. It's a good matchup. I wouldn't say it's awesome, but it's a good matchup, both for rucks and for key forwards against Essendon. Guess where Jackson plays? Those 2 spots. They're pretty inexperienced team in both of those lines. Jackson could have a field day. And if he pops another one of those ceilings, yeah, this could be on. Again, I don't care about the break even at this price point. I'm looking for the matchup, and could it pop for me this week? And yeah, for Luke Jackson, it could. So those are my top 10 trade targets. I think I've hit someone in every single line for you. Some value, some DPP, some top end guys, and some money makers under 200K. But here's the deal. If I named any one player you're playing as a new trade this week in SuperCoach, you have to like this video. That's the deal. If I said a player you're trading into, you have to like this video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so. Every Wednesday, we are dropping my top 10 SuperCoach trade targets. It means you can see what I think are the right moves to make, compare them to what others are looking at, help you with the moves to make. We also have our strategy session. That's already out on the channel. That drops on a Tuesday night. And then if you play that other format of AFL Fantasy on a Monday, we do a top 10 trade target. So you can go back, check out those videos if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel, turn those notifications on. So as soon as a new episode drops, whenever it drops, you get notified straight away. Inside the description of this episode are all the details to become part of our Patreon, to get your hands on some Coaches Panel merch, and to follow us across social media. We're on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. We'd love to join the conversation with you there. Hey, good luck this week as you head into round 15. 2 weeks left of your best 18 and your mid-season buys. We hope the trades you make absolutely pop, and we can't wait to be back with you here on the channel real soon, talking all things fantasy footy.